Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now, available now for pre-order is Soft Underbelly, which is the Italian campaign book from Warlord Games for bolt action. Now, I've really been looking forward to this one because the Italian campaign is where a lot of New Zealand troops were sent to after the conclusion of the North Africa campaign. So for somebody like me, where if you say, hey, you can play New Zealanders in this game, it was a must. Now, I was very kindly slipped a review copy of that, and I've got to say, it's brilliant, but it did also give me a shove to look at ways that you could paint up and convert some troops for this theatre. Now, some of you say quite often that you do prefer when I use Citadel products because, you've got a Games Workshop near you or similar to that, and I thought, well, it would be interesting to tackle that and show you how you can get a pretty accurate result which looks good on the table using just Games Workshop stuff. So you don't have to worry about completely rebuying a paint range just because you want to invest, start some World War II gaming. What can you do instead? So as always, all of the paints will be listed in the description below. Let's get started. Now, when assembling this guy, I've used the body from the new plastic British infantry, the late war British and Canadian infantry, and I've used the arms, weapons, and all the rest from the 8th Army box. Now, reason for this is that during this period, there was a transitional time of equipment, and especially coming into Tunisia and then into Italy, there was quite a few examples of men still using older gear. So in particular, this older mark of the Lee Enfield rifle here, which probably won't show up on the camera, but this is the correct one for that period. Now, needing 2 boxes of infantry to make your army is going to make it slightly pricier. If you do want a simpler version, you can go ahead and go straight to Perry Miniatures. They do shirt sleeves and battle dress figures in metal, but Perry's figures are very slightly smaller than these guys. They are what's considered a true scale 28mm. If you're familiar with their work on the Lord of the Rings miniatures through Citadel, you'll know what I mean, how they didn't quite stack up against Warhammer figures, but it's much of a much. Now, I've begun here by priming this fella in Wraithbone. Ordinarily, I would probably turn to Skeleton Bone from the Army Painter, but we are going to stick purely to Citadel products for this one. You could go to Karak White, but Wraithbone has just a little bit of warmth to it, which is going to be really handy for most of the colours that we're going to apply over top. Now, the first of these colours is going to be the most controversial. We're going to start by painting the brown battle dress by using Steel Legion Drab here. And I've mixed in just a little bit of water so that this will flow. What you'll notice is that coverage isn't perfect as a result, but it's much easier to apply. Now, when I say controversial, you will see arguments about what was the correct colour of British battle dress. Some insist that it had a very green tint. Some will say that Canadian battle dress was more green and that British was more brown, and so on. It is that colour which, like Feldgrau, people love to argue about. One way or the other, brown is certainly the most prevalent colour here, and Steel Legion Drab is going to be, your best shot for this. Now, we'll take 2 coats to get a nice solid colour there, so take your time, do let the first one dry before you start trying to apply the second. We're going to move on now to his khaki drill shirt, and luckily this one's actually really simple. I'm going to use Morghast Bone, and this is a near 1-to-1 match for Iraqi sand. So let's go ahead and apply this, and this is fairly easily done. This covers really well, and we'll see any areas that you do need to come back and give it a second coat. You can be the judge of that. Now, you'll tend to find that that can be done in 1 coat, because unlike the brown trousers, if you get any of the primer showing through on the shirt, it actually adds to the look overall, makes it look a little bit more faded, and that works quite well. We're going to move on to the skin, and while there is no correct way to paint skin, I'm going to start from Cadian Fleshtone. Because we are going to shade this, it's going to darken down quite a bit. So we want to start from a reasonably light prime sort of colour here, even though it is a layer paint. So you'll probably find in some areas you want to come back and give this a second coat, but once again, that is up to you. And now to decide what to do about his helmet. If you want to paint that desert yellow look, say you're painting for the Tunisian campaign, or you want this guy to look, a little more veteran into the Italian campaign, then painting it in Ushabti Bone will give you that cool sandy yellow. I'm going to paint him as though he's either repainted his helmet or been issued a new one, and we're going to use Castellan Green for this. Now this is also the colour that you'd want to paint in things like the Piats or, what else is there, the 2-inch mortar. Any green painted gear, this will go on now. Now when it comes to the helmet straps at the front here, try and avoid those, because it will make our next step that much easier. Now same as with some of the other colours, I did come back to give that a second coat, and we've got a nice solid colour there. Now we're going to go on to his webbing, and that's why I've left that strap now, because we're going to paint that with a fairly light colour. I'm using Karak Stone, and this is going to be most suitable for your Mediterranean theatre or sort of mid-war guys. If you're painting for the European theatre, late war, invasion of Normandy and thereabouts, then switching this colour instead to Death Guard Green would be more accurate. But for now, we're just going to go around all of his webbing, his gaiters as well, and we'll apply a little bit of Karak Stone. Same as with many of these layers, over such a bright primer, you may find you need a second coat rather. Goodness me, I cannot speak today. Now with his webbing settled, we're going to move on to his rifle and any wooden details. So for this, I'm going to turn to Mournfang Brown, though you can use any sort of brown colour you think is going to work for wood. Let's just go ahead and apply this over the entire rifle. I'm not too fussed if I hit the black stuff. And likewise, this little part on his entrenching tool, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush, but paint that in brown too. Now after a couple of coats of that, we can spin him around, and there's one last really odd detail, which again, we don't have the right colour for in the Citadel range. I'm going to use Tallarn Sand here for the water bottle. This had a felt cover, and it would have been a quite pale brown. Now we'll move on to the rather ominously named Iron Warriors, and this is a really dark, just off black kind of gunmetal colour. So no great surprise, we'll paint in the metal on the rifle here. You could use a straight black if you wanted to instead. Now with those details finished, we're actually almost done with our base coats. There's black in his boots, and for this I'm using Abaddon Black. If you were painting an officer, you might instead use here Cadian Fleshtone or Thondia Brown, a dark, leathery sort of colour. Now at this stage, any little bits of cleanup that you have to do, go back and tidy those up now. I have also picked a brown. I use Thondia Brown to paint in his hair. It doesn't really matter what you use, hair is hair, you can use what you'd like. So with that all tidied and ready to go, I have here my pot of Ellie's Brown Liquid. Now what this is a mix of 2 parts Agrax Earthshade, 2 parts Seraphim Sepia, 1 part Lamian Medium, and then just a few drops of Drakenhof Nightshade to help the shading effect. That's a bit of a mouthful, really. I've made up a pot of this because I find it really useful for lots of different things. So it is worth, if you've got an old spare pot going, give that a shot. If you don't want to mix this up, then what you could do would be to just use Agrax Earthshade, but I do thoroughly suggest add a little bit of medium to it to sort of stop it from shading too deeply. So let's go ahead, load up my brush, and then we're going to apply this generously over the entire miniature. You'll notice when it goes on, it does look fairly yellow, but that's going to suit us just fine. Make sure that you're working it into the recesses. And the addition of the medium, I always find, makes this much smoother when it dries. So, at any rate, I'm going to douse this in Ellie's brown stuff, leave it to dry for about half an hour, and then we'll come back and see what we've got. Now once that's had plenty of time to dry, you'll see the end result and the reason for the medium and the mix in that colour. It's not as yellow as Seraphim Sepia would be, it's not as dark as Agrax Earthshade would be, it's brilliant. I really love that mix, and if you are doing stuff that you want to paint very quickly, then Ellie's Brown Liquid, despite its frankly terrifying name, does a really good job of just about everything. Then we're going to move on and start by highlighting, of all things, his webbing first of all, and this is because I've told a wee lie. I'm going to use one army painter colour here, and this is Banshee Brown. The reason why I'm turning to this is you could mix a highlight, You could do half and half white and Karak Stone for this, but Banshee Brown, well, it's there, and it is the perfect color for this. So I'm just going to get in a few areas and sharpen up, oop, I've overdone that, sharpen up the webbing. Now that's relatively quick to do, and it does add quite a bit to the miniature, although I skip his gaiters, don't worry about those. I've got now some Ushabti bone, and I'm going to highlight his shirt with this. Again, you don't have to do a huge amount, but anywhere that there's a really pronounced fold that you want to stand out a bit, just a little Ushabti bone here, and you're away laughing. Concentrating on areas like the edges of his collar is also a really good way to mark the edge between the webbing and his shirt. Now, in order to highlight his trousers, we are actually going to mix up a color. As before, you could just use the Army Painter's Monster Brown for this, but we're going to mix it because it helps to see how it's done. So first of all, we have a little Steel Legion Drab on my palette, and then I'm going to add about the same again in Baneblade Brown. So put those side by side so I can see how much I'm putting down. That looks about right. Now you'll see that Baneblade Brown is quite a departure in color from Steel Legion Drab, so if we highlight straight using that, that's going to look quite sharp. So instead, we're going to mix these two together. And now we can start applying our highlight to our trousers without it looking quite so sharp and unpleasant as the other pure Baneblade Brown would be. So you don't have to be terribly adventurous with this, just go around a few raised areas of detail. And then with that done, we can move on and highlight his skin. And for this, I'm using Kislev Flesh. Now you'll notice here as well that because we've used a thinned out shade, you don't have to worry about going back with a base color and brightening that up again. We can go straight to our highlights, nice and quick. And then once that's finished, you can tilt them sideways, and using the side of your brush and a little bit of Castellan Green, let's just add a wee highlight to the edge of his helmet. Now this you can also use on, like I said, piats and mortars and what have you, but it is really up to you if you want to go to this stage. Now from here what I'm going to do is go take him outside, give him a quick varnish, and then pop a base on him. We'll see what he looks like when he is all finished. And there we have it. From start to finish, our Kiwi soldier is complete using nothing but Citadel products. So yeah, if that's all you can get your hands on, then don't worry, because I know there is a stereotype that going into historical gaming, everybody's quite fussy about how things are painted, but in my experience, that's certainly not been the case. And if you do put down a whole army that looks like this, and somebody says to you,
"It's the wrong trousers,"
then I'm pretty sure you're permitted under the Geneva Convention to push their nose in for them. Now, I've actually been looking forward for an excuse to do this for quite a while, because since the Soft Underbelly campaign was announced, I've really been looking forward to seeing what the options were for New Zealand troops in that campaign. And the book itself is brilliant, because you could just start from the first page and read through the scenarios and get a really good idea of how the Italian campaign opened. It's something which has been a gap in my knowledge for a while, and even though I've done a little of the reading myself, it's really nice to have it condensed and quite orderly so that you can just follow along on the timeline and know what's happening. So really looking forward to finishing off some more Kiwis like this, my New Zealand troopers. It's a project I've had in mind forever. So finally, they'll have some rules which suit them when they hit the table. So thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of the lovely patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, including producers Alan Nuttall, Kyrie Crawford, Trainboy, Fred and Jimmy. Your support really is invaluable. Any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So thank you very much for your time, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.